What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Matt of Pig and Matt here. And as you can see before you, I brought out Best Girl Matt. Why is that? Because today before you, I got Dragonmaids. Roll that intro. So yeah, with the release of Maximum Gold and the reprinting of Chamber Dragonmaid, this deck is now pretty accessible to everybody. And because I kind of like the artwork and think it conceptually is a pretty cool deck, I wanted to build it. So I did. And unfortunately, it all has to be in this very, very cursed looking gold rare. But hey, you do with what you can do. So yeah. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Dragon Maids are a series of cute little waifu cards that kind of manipulate your hand and graveyard in some way, shape, or form to get resources before getting their big counterparts out. Usually at the beginning of battle phase, they'll return to the hand to either special summon the big version from your graveyard or your hand. It just varies. 99% of the time it's out of the graveyard. And with that in mind, it's kind of a fun little control deck. So right here before you see the ratios. You run 3 of the Chamber Dragonmaid, which is your Spell and Trap Searcher, and the best one. Oh, and I should also note that all of their effects prop on normal or special. So you got a bunch of cool, neat tricks you can do. Then you have Parlor here, who has the effect of basically being a Foolish Burial for any Dragonmaid card. So it could be any of your monsters or your spells and traps. Nurse here is a Debris Dragon, in that she summons a Dragonmaid, level 4 and lower from your graveyard. And the last one you run is Kitchen, who can add a Dragonmaid card from your deck to your hand, but then you have to send a Dragonmaid card from your hand to the graveyard. 9 of the small ones is pretty good. The reason I opted for 2 nurse instead of, or 2 nurse, 1 kitchen instead of 2 kitchen, 1 nurse, is because this deck plays a lot on the opponent's turn, and nurse is kind of the best card to play with on the opponent's turn. So that's why I went with that ratio. And in turn, since these are the 3 attributes that you play because there's no dark one for Chamber, I just opted to play the Earth, Fire, and Wind, or Earth, Wind, and Fire. Because do you remember 21st Night, September? You know, that old jazz. Luckily, Ernest and Tinkek, or Tinek, or whatever you pronounce that, are both actually quick effects, with Ernest specialing from your hand and Tinek being 1,000 attack boost, which is really, really helpful. And also, all 3 of them together is 8,000 damage, so they help kind of push in for a lot of damage. So yeah, that's your basic Dragonmaid lineup. You're not going to really see too many people deviating from running those portions because that's been proven to be the best ones. Now on to my personal tech choices in the deck. I opt for 1 Tempest and 1 Debris Dragon. Literally every Dragonmaid is a Debris Dragon target, which is really, really neat. And because of that, I wanted to run it. But this is also the 41st card in the deck. So I feel the need to contractually tell you that if you don't want to run this card, you don't have to. You can drop him and have 40 cards. The Tempest here is really good because it's a reoccurring body, and you can ditch it with like a Parlor in your hand to search out either Chamber or Nurse, depending on the other makeup of your hand. And that's really, really fun play to do. So yeah, that's why I opt for the 1 Tempest. Now for hand traps, you play, first off, play 3 Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. He happens to be the fusion requirements for one of the fusions, so he's never truly dead. And there's enough prevalent decks that use link monsters that you should be able to resolve his effect in any given scenario. So that's why you opt to run him. Next up, I run 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs. These would be gold, but I sold my golds. And the last hand trap I opted to run is 3 Effect Veiler. I went with this over Imperm because this is kind of a going first deck, and you can activate this with or without cards on your board. So that's why I went with this. I mean, it could be Chalice if you prefer that and you're that afraid of DPE, but I just went with this and I regret nothing. Alright, so now on to the spells. For Dragonmaid specific spells, you play 1 Changeover and 3 copies of Hospitality. This is a polymerization that when it's in the graveyard, you can target a Dragonmaid you control, return it to your hand, and this card from your graveyard to your hand. So you get kind of a reoccurring polymerization. If people catch wind of that, you might want to start running 2 copies instead, but for now 1 is perfectly fine. And Hospitality is either a Monster Reborn or it specials 1 from your hand. Just kind of depends on, again, what the scenario is, which is also why Parlor is so good, because she could just dump a target special out with this. And this has the neat effect that the dragon that you send, you can send a corresponding big dragon with the same attribute, which is really, really, really good. So yeah, you max out on this. And the day they make a Dark Dragonmaid, oof, it's going to be super busted card. It's also 1 regular Monster Reborn because your big dragons are big. Also works really well with the fact they all work on normal or special. And then 1 Called by the Grave. And to round out the spells, I opted for 3 copies of Super Polymerization. It's kind of an interesting control card because they can't respond to it. And your extra deck is fairly flexible, so you can run plenty of targets to always be able to resolve this. So yeah, I like this card a lot. And also if they evenly you can fuse your own field, which I don't know why you would ever do that, but it could occur. Now on to the trap cards. There's 3 Tidying plus 1 Downtime. Tidying is probably the best card next to Chamber in the whole deck because it bounces a card on your opponent's field by returning a Dragonmaid. So I think it can also hit their graveyard too, which is random. And then when it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to special a Dragonmaid from your graveyard, which is absolutely nuts. So even if they hit this before you can use it, you can still use it to interact on the opponent's turn and do some cool stuff. It also makes it a perfect discard for your Super Poly if need be. Downtime is a tech I chose because it bounces back row, which is pretty good. So like if they ever Mystic Mine you, you could just kind of return it to their hand. And it can also kind of recycle your Dragonmaid cards too, but I never found myself really needing to do that. I play 2 copies of Rivalry of the Warlords. It's kind of a pseudo floodgate for this deck. It's pretty easy to stick with dragons considering that they're pretty well supported monster type, and you don't really need to do too many plays that don't require you summoning other dragons, so it's a pretty good card. And the last 3 copies of Solemn Strike. You need your Hieratic Seal of Convocations to resolve, and this helps be sure that it resolves. Right. So now into the extra deck. Start out with the most important card. Your 2 copies of House Dragonmaid and your 2 copies of Show. Sheo here is a Omni Negate that when it does, it tags out into House. And then during the standby phase of the turn, it just gives you a free monster from your hand or graveyard, or one of your Dragonmaid monsters. So again, it lets you play on the opponent's turn, lets you do some funky plays, and when you negate one of their cards, it bounces into House Dragonmaid here, who, again, on standby phase, you can target another Dragonmaid you control and special summon a Dragonmaid with a level less than or equal to, I think. Special summon from your hand or graveyard defense position whose level is higher or lower. Oh, higher or lower than the monster. And then it also has a neat effect that when your Dragonmaids bounce back to the hand for any reason, it'll pop a card on the opponent's field. So whether you're using tidying or their own effects during the battle phase, she can help clear the field and get in for very, very big number. Alright. Some other cards you play. The one copy is Striker Dragon because it's a generic Link 1 for dragons. You could also play the last guard dragon that's left if you want to, but who cares. 3 copies of Hieratic Seal of Convoke are the Heavenly Spheres. This card is super good because, again, this deck plays a lot on the opponent's turn, and this is one of the best cards to play during the opponent's turn because it kind of looks at their field and says no, and then you summon your Dragonmaid and you do stuff. So yeah, you max out on this card because you want copies of it. The 1 access code talker and the 1 Boral Sword. You play this if you have rivalry, you play this if you don't have rivalry. Same function. Because I run 1 copy of Debris Dragon, I opted to run 1 Black Rose Dragon because, yeah, free board wipe is free board wipe. And for super poly targets, I just play these guys. It can literally be anything that's relevant to your local. At the very least, you do need Mud Dragon and Venom Dragon, or Venom Fusion Dragon. But the last ones are just kind of up to you. So there's your main deck and your extra deck. Let's show you guys some gameplay of this in action.